Hey YouTube, what's up? This is Boba7772, and today I'm bringing you my review for the last novel in the Halo Forerunner saga, which would be Silentium. So without further ado, let's get started. So like the previous two novels, Greg Bear wrote this, and I think that this was a fantastic book. How I would rate it in comparison to the other two, I still think that Cryptum was best, and that Primordium is probably the worst. But I do think that this is a really good sequel to both books and has wrapped up the story nicely. So the first book is told from the point of view of Born Stellar Makes Eternal Lasting, which turns to be the Isodidact, or the Born Stellar Didact, which is not the one you encounter in Halo 4. Primordium is the one told from the point of view as the Chakas, human Chakas, and then later the Monitor Chakas, later known to be 343 Guilty Spark. And then this book, it's kind of told from the point of view of multiple characters. Catalog, which is kind of like these entities of these Forerunner guys who all go to one central network, kind of like the things that make up Hunters or the Scarabs. Those are the same things, those like worm type things. That's how I always imagine these catalogs, just like those worm type things in a huge kind of like metal suit type thing. I kind of imagine them to look like sentinels, but yeah, so there were multiple catalogs that told the story. There was the librarian, and I thought that the story was, I mean, it wasn't boring in the sense of like I didn't want to read it anymore. I wanted to skip ahead of it, and it wasn't boring either, as in the sense of Primordium was just kind of a boring book. But I guess I just could say that I just didn't find her part of the book as interesting as I found the Didax part of the book. So she goes to this planet years and years ago that has Forerunners on it, but these Forerunners are strange. I think that they have like 5 fingers, and they speak a different language, and they are like a very basic civilization. And this lady bites her, and then there's this other, there's some more Forerunner people. One of their names is Chantigreen, and she accompanies the librarian, or the life shaper. I believe that's what the role is. And so this, those two go down to this old planet, and the librarian takes her armor off and lets this old lady bite her. The old lady bites her, and then the librarian can understand the old lady. Then eventually they leave the planet. Well, while this is going on, it shows that they are, the catalog is interviewing the Didact, which is the one that you encounter in Halo 4 and the original Didact. Well, he was dropped off in this part of space. I can't remember exactly what they called it, but it was a part of space that had been like overrun by flood, and just I can't remember for the life of me. It had a very specific name that I at the time I thought would be easy to remember, but it really wasn't. So the Didact is dropped off in this flood space, and he's abandoned on this Forerunner ship, along with a couple of other guys. There was a catalog and then 2 other people, and those 2 others were just kind of like went into stasis and were abandoned in space. Well, after this, the Primordial talks to the Didact and pretty much makes him go insane. He's like, okay, I know how we're gonna have to stop this thing. So eventually he gets out. I think that Faber rescues him or something, and eventually both Didax and the librarian all meet up. Didact goes back to his home, and the Born Stellar Didact goes and talks to him, and then the librarian comes in. And then after this conversation, you figure out that the Didact has gone insane. So he goes off to this other part of the planet, and he's like, I know where it is, that thing that you were looking for when you were a treasure hunter before you found me. It could be this thing. And they're like these really ancient precursor artifacts. So the Didact is like, we can't just leave him here, blah, blah, blah. And then Flood come, and they're like, we gotta go. So both Didacts go in their own separate ship, and the Didact tells the Isodidact, here, lead me to the Greater Ark, and I've got business there. So he goes there, and he ends up composing, which is that thing in Halo 4, which turns people into those machine things that you fight, and he goes and composes most of the Didact's humans who she gathered there during her time in Primordial. So she gets like uber upset, and then like the Isodidact just is like he was already really, really awesome, but he got like really, really more awesome here, and he pretty much like showed them that he was a leader that they needed, and that he had grown, and he was they may not have wanted him as a leader, but he was what they had. And eventually the Greater Arc starts to get kind of destroyed, and the floor starts to walk in, and everybody in the room, including Faber, is killed, except for the Isodidact, the Born Stellar Didact, which is saved by 343, the Monitor Chakas, or 343 Guilty Spark. And I've actually, from 343 Guilty Spark's role in this book, I like him a lot more than I did in all of Primordium. I liked him more in this book and Cryptum than Primordium. Because Primordium, he just kind of seemed like a boring character, but in this he kind of had something to fight for, which the librarian explains. He had Riser and Minerva. So he saves the Isodidact, and they go to the lesser arc, or the arc that you encounter in Halo 3. So they go there with all of the librarian's catalog species, and the librarian heads to it's either Requiem or it's some other planet that she sends this thing off to Requiem. Anyway, she goes, I believe it's Requiem. She goes, and the Didact's there, and there's this other precursor, and she's the only one who the Didact hasn't composed yet. And the librarian's like, you gotta help me, otherwise the Didact's gonna tear himself apart. He's not the man he used to be. He's not the man that you would have married if he hadn't chosen me. She's like, oh, you know about that, blah, blah, blah. So the librarian is talking to this lady, this precursor lady, who's extremely loyal to the Didact, but does not like the librarian herself. So, but the librarian does eventually convince her to let her do all this stuff. The librarian sneaks in, and she shoots the Didact, which I believe you can see in the terminals of Halo 4, and then she puts him in his Cryptum, and sends the Cryptum off to Requiem, along with all of his, I guess the Cryptum's already on Requiem. And then she's headed back to her ship, and she sees a Promethean Knight comes out, and there's a Watcher on its back. And at first I thought that it was a Promethean Crawler, because it's like on all four legs or something, but I believe it was a Knight. And they were probably all there, all the types of Crawler, Watcher, and Knight, but she's like, oh, is this the Forerunner lady who helped me? I guess we'll never know now, because all these guys are alike. So she goes, and she's like, okay, so I'm going go ahead and send a message to the to everybody, all Forerunner ships. They're like, well, a bunch of them are infected by the Flood. She goes, especially those. Tell them that we are headed to Earth, and blah, blah, blah. So she's trying to distract all the Flood to bring them to Earth, except for the Isodidact ship. She believes he survived, and finds out that he did survive. So she's like, okay, hey, here's what we're doing. Everybody's coming to Earth, and that's where our final stand is going to be. So the last battle was on either Edry or Primal, or whatever the Earth's old name is. So they go there, and then the librarian's like, okay, chant to Green, which is that character earlier in the book. She's like, you're the new life shaper. You're going to take all of these human specimens that we've gathered. There's only a few hundred. You're going to go and take them to the lesser arc, and then you're going to be what saves humanity itself. I'm going to stay here and oversee construction of the portal. And they're like, and she's argues for a bit, but then eventually agrees to go. And I kind of got lost a little bit on this last part. The librarian's sitting there, and then the Gravemind sends the guy who is in Chakas, the Master Builder. No, not the Master Builder. The Lord of Admirals. She sends him, Fabiath, or whatever his name is, to go and to speak to the librarian and reveals these secrets. And I don't know if it's a Flood trick or not. She kind of realized this, but kind of didn't. I'm assuming that the librarian was under the influence of the Flood. And then she's like, oh no, I have to send a message to the Isodidact, because all these precursor artifacts, which is what the Erdidact found earlier in this book, they've been a central plot point for the Halo 4 terminals and for this book, I believe, or this whole series of books. All that pretty much they have left of the precursors. She's like, oh no, all this stuff is going to be destroyed. She sends a message to the Isodidact, is like, do not activate the Halo array. Well, he ignores it because he doesn't believe the message. I'm assuming that, like me, he believes that she's been overtaken by the flood. And then she's like, he's like, okay, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to activate this. So he activates, and some of his last words, let me find it real quick, because I found it, once again, like a lot of what he says, really poetic. Here it is. Isodidact, there's like a 3-page chapter. Okay. He activates the Halo array. 1 second. Oh, wrong chapter. It's one of the last pages of the books. Or of the book. Okay, it's string 38, so it's like a 3-page thing. And I guess it's not exactly poetic, but I really did like, as he activates the Halo array, the book says, "We will feel side effects. How intensely, no one can tell. There have never been such power unleashed all at once. I press the activation plate and close my eyes. Forgive us, I say. Have said. Will always say." So I believe that was in string 38, the second to last chapter, and I believe that that was just kind of his way of saying that this is going to have an effect on the galaxy forever. Which, you know, I might be wrong, but I've had to interpret a lot in this book since it kind of goes over my head a little. So the Isodidact activates a Halo array, and then there's a chapter from 343 Guilty Spark, pondering back on the question that Isodidact had asked him before he sent him off to Installation 04. If it were up to you, would you have activated the Halo, which kind of coins back to Halo Combat Evolved when 343 Guilty Spark's talking to the Master Chief, and he's like, last time you asked me if I would do it, my answer has not changed. It was something like that. So all in all, I think that this was just a fantastic conclusion to this series. It was not as terrible as Primordium was, but it wasn't as superb as Cryptum was. But all in all, it was just like a really good second part to the Cryptum book, and I guess you could say third part to the Primordium book. I think that you could probably go through Primordium without, or like you could read Cryptum and then just Silentium without having to do Primordium if you had wanted. If I ever go back and read these books, I'll probably just do Cryptum and Silentium, because pretty much all you have to know in Primordium is the attack on the capital is over, the Born Stellar Didact comes, saves Chakas by making him 343 Guilty Spark, and then Minerva and Riser are saved, along with a bunch of other humans, and that Primordium on the Halo Ring is a Gravemind. So just a few plot points from that book. I'm hoping that they do kind of come back to all these books in the future, maybe a future series. Shows what maybe the Isodidact is still alive, who knows. Also, there's a, if each of the chapters here, I'll show you one. Each, or 10 of these strings, there are like 39 strings in this book, and 10 of them have this little symbol over them. And the little symbol you can enter on Waypoint. Here is one. You can go to Halo Waypoint and just press X a couple times, and then you can enter all of those. And there will be an epilogue to this book called Rebirth, and it pretty much comes from the point of view of Riser, and kind of sees, from Riser's point of view, of the Isodidact kind of overseeing the rebuilding of humanity and the resettlement of everything, and how they have a portal which kind of reflects back to Halo 2 and 3 that can lead them to the Ark in the future, and then they say that maybe their kids will be able to meet, which kind of leads me to believe that there are some Forerunners still alive, and by the drastic ages that the Forerunners can live, it could be that Forerunners like the Born Stellar Didact, Chantagreen, there's another one in Rebirth, and probably a few more around, are all still alive. And then there could be a possibility that those two that the Erdidactyla floating in space could still be alive. Just random ones we haven't met could still be alive, and the Erdidact himself could still be alive, which you can see here on the cover. All in all, this was a really great book. I would probably give it about a 8 out of 10. The reason knocking off some points there is it just, like Cryptum, it had my attention the entire way through. This one didn't exactly have my attention all the way through. I set it down a few times. I wasn't like intent on finishing this in a day like I was with Cryptum. It kept jumping back from different parts, and with the characters who I really didn't know and bond with too well, I wasn't really interested in their parts. The catalog became more interesting for me. The Erdidact, I loved reading his parts. The Librarian, her parts were interesting but could be boring at times. But it didn't really feel like it was slow-paced or dragged on like Primordium. But all in all, a really, really nice addition to the Halo Forerunner saga. And, you know, just like the new games, it's a saga, not a trilogy, so maybe we'll see some more here. Just kind of like what we saw with Rebirth, but maybe they'll have some actual more novels. And then maybe we can see kind of that the Isodidact is still alive, fingers crossed. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you are a Halo fan, I would definitely recommend picking up this Forerunner saga. It's probably the best out of all the books. It changed my favorite character from being Frederick 104, which I read in the Fall of Reach, First Strike, Ghost of Onyx, and Glass Lens, to being the Born Stellar Makes Eternal Lasting, or the Isodidact, or the Born Stellar Didact. Just a really overall great character. This book it makes all the characters really interesting. Chantagreen actually became really interesting for me. The Librarian became more interesting at the end of this book. I hope that we can have some more on the Librarian, though I do think that she's dead. Maybe some earlier adventures. I don't know. The Erdidact, his parts were really interesting. The Isodidact, once again, just spectacular. And then Chakas, it was great to see him again. So yeah, also, if you get this book, make sure to get on Waypoint and enter the codes, or you can just be lazy like a lot of people, and just look it up on YouTube. But if you do enter the codes in on Waypoint, you get a bunch of XP for Halo 4 as well. But I felt satisfied actually going and entering the codes for my book, having read all the books and entering the codes. So yeah, that's about it. If you find the series, definitely recommend getting it, and big fan of the Halo series. This is a great addition. So thank you for watching, and until next time, keep collecting. Bye.